love you, Cleveland, and I love you, Ohio, and a very pleasant welcome to this week's version of Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Hi, I'm Bruce Drennan along with Ryan Smith. Great to have you aboard for this week's show. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Bruce. Amazing Cavaliers game that we're going to dive into here, I'm sure. Now, a little preview, I'd say one of the best games in my recent memory.
Well, we're certainly going to lead with that, but first things first, we have a full show of very interesting topics for you. Certainly we'll be covering the NBA and the Cavaliers, but want to get a little college basketball in there for you. We also want to talk about the Combine. I know that Ryan was just riveted and glued to the set watching those muscular, tremendously conditioned athletes run around in shorts. And I know that we're going to get a very thorough report from Ryan in that regard. More importantly, we're going to have Bob DiBiasio, Vice President of the Cleveland Guardians, joining us in segment 2 to talk some Guardians baseball and the Central Division. And then in the third and final segment, as we continue our preview of the divisions here, as we get you ready for the 2024 campaign, today we will look at the National League Central Division and take a look at those guys and their prospects. And of course, always in the last segment, we leave some time for the Ask Bruce portion of the show. But first things first, let's dive into the Cavaliers' historic victory last night. And I do say historic, 105-104. And literally, I mean historic, because Dean Wade made 5 3-pointers and scored 20 points in the fourth quarter, outscoring Boston all by himself, by the way, to snap Boston's 11-game winning streak, which is the longest in the NBA so far this year. And the Cavaliers overcame a 22-point deficit. This was the Cavs' biggest fourth quarter comeback in franchise history. And Travis and Jason Kelce were not only in attendance, but were actually leading the Cavs fans in cheering the comeback. Keep in mind that this win was accomplished without Donovan Mitchell. Evan Mobley left the game in the third quarter with a sprained ankle. Then the controversial call at the end of the game, the review with 0.7 seconds to go. Jason Tatum couldn't win the game at the line because the call was reversed against Garland, who was originally called for the foul. But very fascinating finish, overturned. The Kelces, of course, were being honored because they're from the Cleveland area, but growing up in Cleveland. And by the way, Wade grew up in Kansas and is a big Kansas City Chiefs fan. And, of course, with Travis winning yet another Super Bowl. So, Ryan, take it away. It was quite a historic game for the Cavaliers. I think particularly because Mitchell didn't even play at all, and we've seen the Cavs struggle when he has been out in these selected games this season.
Yeah, not only was Mitchell out for that entire game, obviously, but then Evan Mobley went down there in that third quarter after rolling his ankle coming off of the dunk. I mean, if you don't believe in miracles, Bruce, I'm not sure what else you can explain last night. Maybe you want to attribute it to that now. Maybe Swifties are picking up on the Cavaliers as their NBA team of choice, which I'll certainly take any day of the week. But I mean, yeah, it was incredible because you go look at that game, I'm watching it. As soon as Mobley went down, they went on another 10-0 run to extend that lead, and it looked like the Cavaliers were pretty much just lost out there. It didn't look like they were really running any plays. They were just kind of running up and down the court. There was zero flow. They were turning the ball over. It was quite messy, and it was very concerning considering this is now their second nationally televised game in a week when we just showed the world that the Cavaliers kind of bowed over to the Knicks, right? I don't know what happened in that timeout that JB called, but Dean Wade, I mean, he just turned into a completely different animal. He couldn't miss. It was incredible. George Niang stepped up. He had some great passes there to Dean Wade. He made a 3 of his own. And then we started playing defense, Bruce. It was amazing. It's like, wow, what happens when you play defense? You actually get back in the game. But, I mean, the 20 points down with 9 minutes left, I can't really explain it. I think it's a testament of this Cavs team. They could have easily just went away. You were without your superstar there in Donovan Mitchell. You lose your other superstar in Evan Mobley. And I don't know whether attribute it more to the Cavs, the Celtics. The Celtics kind of just, I'm assuming, took their foot off the gas and assumed that they were just going to cruise the rest of the way. They were kind of shooting 3-pointers there. But, I mean, it was incredible to see it. And as you mentioned, the largest fourth quarter comeback in franchise history. I'm like, I
Well,
woke up this morning still trying to figure out the words to explain it, but it was amazing.
well, since we were with you last week with our show, the Cavs last Thursday night got beat by Chicago, 132 to 123. DeRozan had an unbelievable game. So did Drummond for them. Mobley had 25 points and 13 rebounds for us. Mitchell actually played, had 19 points. Garland 23, LeVert 14 points and 15 assists. And then Friday night, the Cavs bounced back with a 110-100 win over Detroit. Garland had a 29-point performance. Mobley 22 points, 17 rebounds in that affair. Then you had the Sunday night game in which New York, and Ryan alluded to it, 107-98 a victory, but no Mitchell, no LeVert in that game. And New York's Brunson actually got hurt with a knee, and they still won the game against the Cavaliers. So, but here's the point I want to make about Wade with last night. It's interesting to me that we have seen the Cavs this year. Strus has stepped up in an individual game. Merrill has stepped up in an individual game. LeVert has been there. Okoro has been there. Now Wade is there. But my question to you, Ryan, will that translate in the playoffs? Because that's the key. And even though this was a glorious historic win against the best team in the East and maybe the best team in the entire NBA, fact of the matter is that New York beat us the other night, and they beat us in the playoffs last year with physical basketball. Are we yet ready? Are we confident that that physicality will be there come playoff time? Because we do know the officials let them bang even more than they do in the regular season. And they do let them go in the regular season quite extensively.
Well, you certainly hope so, and odds are they're going to need to in the playoffs when you're going potentially 7 games with some of the best teams in the league, right? But that's kind of been the theme of this whole season is the next man up mentality. You go back to the early part of the season, they go on that amazing stretch run where they were like 18-1 in their 19 games without that stretch of Mobley and Darius Garland. Then you lose, you see Max Strus heat up with one of the craziest heat checks I've ever seen in the Mavericks game. They get an amazing win there. And then obviously Dean Wade is just the latest example of that, outscoring the Celtics 20-16 in the final quarter. So the Cavs clearly have the talent around them that they might have lacked last year in the depth. Now it's just if they can string the consistency together. And, we're going to see this last stretch here. We got a couple more games without Mitchell. We don't know the news on Evan Mobley yet, but it didn't look great. So you're probably going to be at least a week here without Mobley heading into the playoffs. And then that's kind of been the theme of this whole season. And what JB's had to deal with is these injuries and figure out what the best lineups to put out on the court is, because you haven't had these consistent rotations, because you aren't able to, because their players are just getting hurt. But, luckily where the Cavs are standing right now in the 2 seed, and it looks as though they have a big enough lead, you'd think, to kind of at least finish out, the 3 seed. The Bucks are ahead of us. So at the very least, you expect them to go into the playoffs as that 3 seed. And, match up in the first round, they'll probably avoid the 76ers, which I think is a good thing. You potentially could still get matched up with the Knicks. They've been struggling as of late, although we know we beat us. And that's the problem, is because is a game like the Knicks, for example, is that really who we are? And we have to figure that out still. I know it's this late in the season, but it doesn't seem like we figured that out, because we just gave up 19 boards to a guy like Josh Hart, who's listed at like 6'4", right? But then you come back in the Celtics and you have one of the best games of the season and non-national television. You kind of erased what you showed everybody against the Knicks, but now you're going into the playoffs, and you hope and assume that if you get matched up with a young team like the Orlando Magic or a struggling team in the Heat that might make the playoffs barely, the play-in tournament, that they're going to be able to go into that second round, Bruce. But that's really when it's going to show if we're made for that stage, because quite frankly, we've showed signs of it, but we have been anything but consistent this year.
I wish we had another banger. I wish we had an enforcer that we could take the pressure off Mobley and Allen, because the burden is definitely going to be upon them. All right, let's shift gears and go to Indianapolis, Indiana, where the combine was staged this last week. But before we do so, free agency will be in full swing here. And the Browns have 4 players who are eligible for full-fledged free agency. Zadarius Smith, the edge rusher, Shelby Harris, defensive lineman, Taki the linebacker is out there, and of course, Joe Flacco. So there's that to be considered. Has there been any talk about retaining Joe Flacco back home while I'm still in Florida, as you can see, still doing the show here? By the way, a programming note, we have one more show that we'll be doing from Florida next week. And then we'll be coming home and be back in our studios in downtown Cleveland. Has there been any talk this past week since I've been on the air with you, Ryan, about Flacco?
Well, just yesterday, actually, as we're filming this on Wednesday, Joe Flacco's agent came out and said that Joe Flacco's number one option would be to come back here in Cleveland. And whether that's because of, when the draft combine happens, all the GMs get together, all the information gets gathered, and maybe that was a sign that maybe there isn't an opening somewhere else for Joe Flacco. So now he's kind of playing his cards of, and he knows he's become a fan favorite here. So he's obviously probably going to be welcomed back by the fan base, no doubt about that. But that's about it. We still don't know what's going to be our future at the backup quarterback, whether we're going to stick with DTR, whether we're going to draft another guy. Bring back PJ Walker, if not, as our third inactive on the sidelines. But as of yesterday, Joe Flacco said he wants to come back and play here. So whether that's going to come to fruition, nobody really knows for sure yet. But maybe the options that Joe Flacco thought he had of being a bridge quarterback somewhere else to a team that drafts a young quarterback, maybe that won't be the case. So it is right now remains a possibility that Joe Flacco's back here, but nothing's come to fruition yet, obviously.
Well, to refresh everybody's memory, we do not have a first-round pick. We have one second-round pick, that's number 54. We have one third-round pick, that's number 85. We do not have a fourth-round pick. We have 2 picks in the 5th round, number 134 from Carolina, number 154 from Arizona. We have 2 picks in the 6th round, number 204 from Houston, number 207 from Baltimore, and 1 pick in the 7th and final round at 227 from Atlanta. With that being said, and with the players that we mentioned a week ago that might be of interest to the Browns in the upcoming draft, how did those guys look, and what are your observations considering the combine at Indianapolis?
Yeah, well, it's no doubt that after the season, everybody was kind of in agreement. The biggest deficiency, if that's what you want to call it, was finding another capable receiver outside of Amari Cooper. And I think that still remains true. I know the Browns met with a few wide receivers. I'm drawing a blank on the guy from Alabama, but they also met with Troy Franklin, a big-bodied guy out of Oregon. I know Xavier Worthy out of Texas was a name that was floating around that might be available, but due to his record-breaking 40 time, the 4.21, I'm sure he's moving up on everybody's big board. So he
Let
might
me
not
interrupt
be there.
you. That's that's the kid. He's only 160 pounds. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
But he's a speed demon, isn't he?
Yeah, out of Texas. He broke John Ross's record.
Yeah.
He ran a 4.21, which is just mind-blowing. But that's kind of been the trend we've been seeing these last couple of years. Is the wide receiver classes are just getting deeper and deeper. And, you mentioned, Bruce, obviously that 54 is our first draft pick. And we never know because Andrew Berry, he loves to move around. We don't know if he's going to trade back. We hope not because we know we want a receiver in that range. But then it really comes down to who's going to be the best available. If they don't want to just sit there and take the best player available if they don't think it's a value. We obviously know how that's not how Andrew Berry operates. So that's still to be seen. Obviously, maybe a D tackle if a guy like Tavondre Sweat out of Texas is there. I don't think he will be. He had a very good combine. But it seems likely we're going to be sitting there, and there's going to be a pretty decent receiver that we think is capable of coming in the first year and making an impact.
And of course, these kids will be able to make visitations to these NFL clubs for individual workouts in front of the coaching staff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the new league year starts here March 13th, so we're filming on the 7th, so the 6th, excuse me. So that's about a week away. So that's things when really things we'll see the ball start to roll in here. And obviously, free agency is that first step because what we do in free agency is obviously going to dictate what we do in the draft. That's why it's before the draft. So obviously, if we come out and sign one of these free agents at wide receiver, maybe they'll look to do something else with their pick. But I think as it stands right now, certainly that wide receiver is going to be the top priority in the draft.
Okay, let's move on to college basketball, where Ohio State this past Sunday was victorious over Michigan 84-61. And what's significant about that is it's the third straight win for the Buckeyes under Coach Diebler. That also snaps a 3-game skid to Michigan. I don't know if it's in the cards, but do you think it's feasible that the Buckeyes could still possibly sneak into the big dance rather than the NIT?
Well, I think the only realistic way that that happens due to their poor play in the first portion, really 3/4 of the season, you want to say, is if they go win the Big Ten tournament. Obviously, they get that automatic bid. But I don't know. Maybe Diebler's got something cooking there, and certainly we talked to Tanner last week, who said, I mean, if he keeps playing out the way he is, then he's going to give something the new AD to consider there at Ohio State. I know that the vibe is they want to go outside externally and figure out who the next head coach is going to be. But I mean, if we sit here and we see Diebler somehow win the Big Ten tournament and the Buckeyes manage to get in, I don't know how you can't seriously consider him and even possibly place him as your top candidate to replace Chris Holtmann.
I don't even think they have to win the Big Ten tournament. I think if they can get to the finals, it might be enough of a statement to the committee because of that signature win against Purdue after the firing. I mean, I just have an outside hunch on that, but they've got to be very impressive in the Big Ten tournament. Like you say, there's no question about it. All right, let's go to the top-ranked teams in the country and start with Houston, the number 1 ranked team in the country, who had a win over Oklahoma, 87-85, a close call for them in that one, Ryan.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's kind of been the story this year for them. But I mean, I think they're still probably looking on the outside in. I think they're going to have to win the next couple for sure. But then again, anything can happen. You go to the Big 12 tournament, whatever. I don't know. Anything can happen this late in the season. So we'll see. But, I'm hoping for it, Bruce.
UConn a win over Seton Hall, 91-61. I believe one of their losses this year was to Seton Hall earlier this year. Am I wrong on that?
You very well could be right. I'm not positive.
I think so. So they avenged that with a big 30-point statement. Purdue, who had dropped the number 3 in the country, a win over Michigan State, 80-74. And then last night they had a big win against Illinois. That game was at Champaign. And Illinois, of course, is ranked number 12 this week in the top 25. And Purdue with a statement victory, 77-71 over the Fighting Illini, who inevitably are going to make the NCAA tournament. But Purdue with Edey still a threat and the Big Ten's best hope of winning the national championship, the first since Mateen Cleaves with Izzo and Michigan State running.
Yeah, I mean, as Tanner said, Purdue is obviously the one that's been carrying the Big Ten for the last couple of years, even though they've had some struggles in the early rounds once they get to the big dance. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if we're sitting here and we're seeing a rematch in the championship of Purdue and Illinois, right? They're clearly the top 2 teams in the Big Ten right now. Purdue is obviously a little bit better. They came back and won that game just recently, as you mentioned, Bruce. But I mean, Tanner mentioned Zach Edey could potentially join some elite. When I say elite, I mean elite company of the only players in history to win multiple John Wooden Awards for the best player in the country. So we'll see. I know Purdue's yet to get over that big hump. They've lost to some teams that, quite frankly, they have no business losing to. But I don't know, Bruce. Maybe this will be the year they finally get the Big Ten out of the mud. But I wouldn't be too confident given history.
Yeah, well, Purdue with the loss to Ohio State and the other one earlier in the season at Northwestern. Tennessee, a win over Alabama, 81-74. So the Volunteers continue to appear to be the best team in the Southeastern Conference. You mentioned Tanner Castora, who was our guest last week, a NCAA college basketball expert. And he was very high on Tennessee and actually made a statement that the Southeastern Conference, you could really make a case, might be the toughest conference in the country this year. I don't know about that with the Big 12, but he made that statement.
Yeah, the Big 12 might have something to say about that. And obviously the Big East is still hanging around with UConn and Marquette and whatnot. But I mean, yeah, the SEC, Tennessee, I think is definitely the best team in there. But again, as we bring up Tanner, he mentioned Auburn is a team to look out for in itself. We know they had some success. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there might be a 1 seed coming up here possibly in the tournament. And I mean, Bruce Pearl, great coach. He's obviously had success there. So, I mean, the SEC is really turning around. And I mean, for a conference that's, been labeled as a football school as of late, as deserved, I will say that, they're really producing some good product here on the basketball court.
Arizona's number 5. They had a win over Oregon, 103-83. Arizona, the best shot for the disbanding Pac-12. Iowa State's number 6. But let me go to North Carolina, number 7, who had a win over NC State, 79-70, just last night, or recently. And then they had the win over Notre Dame since we've been with you. And that was a very significant win of 84-51. Not that Notre Dame is anything to brag about this year. Marquette, number 8 in the country, lost to Creighton 89-75. Creighton's ranked number 10. And I found it fascinating that Tanner last week says Creighton may very well be good enough to win the national championship. He believes they've got all the pieces. And so far, so good. They look like they're in a position to really challenge.
Yeah, I mean, now 2 amazing signature wins, right, over UConn and Marquette. I mean, you have a seasoned coach with a lot of March Madness experience in McDermott there. They have a 7-footer. They got wings that can shoot and stretch the floor. It's pretty much the perfect formula for teams that we've seen go win national championships. And yeah, I mentioned Tanner said he would love to see that matchup between Zach Edey, and I can't remember the 7-footer's name right now on Creighton, but I remember watching him last year, and they have some sour taste in their mouth because they've had some disappointment in the tournaments, and I know they're waiting to get back there. But yeah, and the field's obviously as open as it ever has been, it seems like. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them make a deep run.
Coach John Shire, of course, the successor to Mike Krzyzewski at Duke, has bounced back since we've been with you last with a couple of victories, one over NC State, 79-54, and a victory over Virginia, 73-48. I mentioned Creighton, number 10. Baylor's number 11, and they got a win over Texas, 93-85. Illinois is 12. They did defeat Wisconsin, 91-83, but then the losses we mentioned last night to Purdue. Boy, Wisconsin is an interesting team. Boy, they were so strong in the first half, and they have fallen apart since.
Yeah, well, maybe that's just a sign of the Big Ten maybe getting a little switch here halfway. Obviously, here we've seen Ohio State kind of have a tale of 2 halves of the season as soon as they got rid of Holtman, right? Obviously, Purdue's still up there, but we know Ohio State just beat them. Purdue almost lost to Illinois. They got the win, and Illinois is obviously no joke. But yeah, I mean, the Big Ten, that just makes it even better, Bruce, for Ohio State's chances here as they go head to the tournament and look to make their way in.
And then Auburn, we mentioned, they're number 13. They had a win over Mississippi State, 78-63, and then Missouri, 101-74. Very dangerous team to be matched up against in the upcoming Big Dance. Kansas dropped 7 spots in the rankings. They're now number 14 after losses to BYU and Baylor. Now that ends a streak of 55 weeks that the Jayhawks have been ranked in the top 10. However, they bounced back last night with a victory over Kansas State, 90-68, but still, Bill Self and company, hard to figure out this year. I don't count them out for a second because of what Self's track record is, first at Illinois and now the great success at Kansas.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you have a coach in Bill Self who just recently won a championship 2 years ago, obviously has won multiple, you can never count them out. I mean, that BYU loss ended a plethora of winning streaks at home there for the Jayhawks, but now 8 losses. Like you said, they bounced back. But I mean, that all that really matters is that they're going to get in the tournament. And once a team like that is in the tournament, I mean, I don't care if you put them as a 2 seed, a 3 seed, a 4 seed. No team in the country wants to get matched up with them.
Right. Kentucky with a win over Arkansas, 111-102. The Wildcats under Calipari ranked number 15 in the country now. Alabama, their loss to Tennessee, we mentioned. They also lost to Florida, 105-87. So Alabama's got to regroup in a hurry before the SEC tourney and the NCAA. And then South Carolina with a win this past weekend over Florida, 82-76. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back on Bonus Time with Drennan on the Big Play Sports Network. Bob DiBiasio, the Vice President of the Cleveland Guardians, joins us next.
Now here is the risk that Brown had to take with.
Well, great to have you with us. This week's version, Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network, still coming your way from beautiful Cape Coral, Florida. one more show down here. Next week, by the way, Al Pulowski, the host of Guardians Live pregame, postgame on the Bally Sports Great Lakes Network, will be joining us, and looking forward to that very much to get you ready for the baseball season. But what better way to do so today than welcoming my old friend Bob DiBiasio, Vice President of the Cleveland Guardians, joins us on Zoom. How are you, Bobby D?
I'm doing wonderfully, Bruce. You're looking good there from Florida. I'm in Arizona. So we're doing this cross country. Spring training's been, as always, as you know, one of the best times of the year in our game. And it's been a very interesting with the new coaching staff, a new skipper. It's been a very interesting and fun spring thus far.
Well, let's start with that decision to hire Stephen Vogt as the manager, succeeding Terry Francona. A sure thing Hall of Famer Terry indeed will be. But it's interesting in a few aspects of it. First of all, Stephen will be a rookie manager. I think it's inevitable based on his reputation prior to us hiring him that he would have been hired by another team. But it's also interesting that it seems in the major leagues, Bob, the trend is there for going with younger guys. There's still a few exceptions of old timers like Boshi, but basically it's going younger with these managers.
Absolutely. Bruce Bochy, Ron Washington getting the job with the LA Angels, and he's in his 70s. But you're right. The trend is obviously younger in that dugout. Managers that have either worked through with the analytics that are so prevalent in our game today, either in the minor leagues or as a player. As you mentioned, Steve's going to be a rookie manager, just a short time removed from a playing career. You know, his playing career didn't start in the big leagues till he was 27 years old. So he comes out of college and he bounces around the minor leagues, fights hard as a catcher to stay in the game. And then all of a sudden it clicks and he becomes a two-time All-Star, and he finishes his baseball career playing wise at 37, is a coach with Seattle last year. And now all of a sudden, you know, he's the skipper. And I agree with you. Somebody, if we did not have him as our 45th manager in franchise history, somebody would have. And the interesting thing, Bruce, about what he's brought with his younger coaching staff, even though he still has Sandy Alomar and Carl Willis, Chris Vallejo, the hitting coach, is in his third year. But we have a younger coaching staff as well, mostly guys that we have brought up from our minor leagues who know this young baseball team of ours. So skill development was very prevalent. The drills that we ran in early spring training, you could tell it was a young coaching staff working still on the important fundamentals with a young baseball team.
What, did it just catch up to Terry with all the responsibility? I know that you had told me off the air the Dodgers have a traveling entourage of 90 guys, and the overseer of that is the manager. But obviously there's health issues there too with Terry.
Yeah, there is. And he's doing well. I've chatted with him a few times. Haven't ventured down to Tucson. We were hoping to get together for a little golf game, but our schedules still haven't aligned, unfortunately. It'd be nice to get over to La Paloma or Ventana Canyon, where you and I used to tee him up, El Conquistador. And back in the day when we trained in Tucson, those are many moons ago. But he's doing well, and he needed to take a step back and just take care of himself and do some things that he's never done before in his life. Like this summer, Bruce, he's going to Ballybunion to play golf with some friends. So he's been to Hawaii this winter to play some golf, just to make sure that he's healthy and he made the right decision. You know, when you manage in this business for more than 20 years, it can beat you up.
It must have been Tenant Canyon. I remember playing there. I don't know if it was with you or not. But it was, I was there one time and there was a family of, what do they call them? The holiday, not wild
Oh yeah, you
boar,
and I,
but
yeah, we were on the tee box together and we smelled them and we heard them from 50 yards away and we're like,
yeah,
what in the world is
yeah,
that? And they just walked straight over the tee. I remember that vividly.
yeah. And then we had to wait for them to clear the fairway because they were right in the landing spot.
Yeah.
But let me get back to the coaching staff. I felt it was vital with hiring a rookie manager, as talented as he may prove to be and as successful as we hope he will be. I thought it was vital that Carl Willis was retained, because every rookie manager, no matter how good, has got to learn the ropes in manipulating the pen, knowing pitch count, not just pitch counts, but when that pitcher has been used out of the pen, how many days in a row, how fresh is he if I need him 2 days from now, etc. And Willis is one of the best in the big league. So to have him standing next to Vogt throughout these games, I thought was going to be vitally important.
No question about it. I think first day of spring training, Steven's first press conference with the media here in Arizona, he talked about how he was going to hold Carl Willis's hand because he's so important. Now, remember, for 10 years, Stephen Vogt was a big league catcher, so he was making between 150, 160 decisions with his pitching staff. You know, what pitches to throw, being honest with his skipper on whether a guy still has it or not, how to pump up a guy. So even with that experience that he had gone through, again, you know, making 150, 60 decisions that a catcher makes during the course of a baseball game, you still need a guy like Carl Willis. So yes, keeping Sandy, keeping Carl Willis, I think was a stroke of genius by our baseball guys and Stephen Vogt, because he will need to lean on the experience of those two incredible baseball men.
I definitely think it's very intriguing that the Guardians went out and signed Carlos Carrasco Cookie to a minor league contract. And he admitted in that first outing, he pitched the opening game against the Reds, our spring training partner there in Goodyear, that he was very nervous. And I can certainly understand that, Bob, because of all the years that he spent with the Indians. But he was part of the Lindor trade to the Mets and didn't do badly with the Mets. But it's not necessarily a given that he's going to make this roster. I'm cheering for him because I think he could be of great value. I mean, I've said for decades, major league teams do not finish the season with the same 5-man rotation that they started the season with breaking spring training camp. So in that regard, he could be that fill-in guy, or he could be a long reliever in the pen. His experience, I think, if we're going to be involved in the divisional crown race, would be invaluable. So I'm cheering for him to make it, but comment on Cookie rejoining the team here in the spring.
I happened to be on the field participating in a pregame ceremony as we were celebrating 9-10 employees of the city of Goodyear that have been with us from the very beginning when we moved out here in 2009. So I stayed on the field for the national anthem, and then Cookie came out. We shook hands. He went and hugged a couple of the umpires. So you were like, okay, he might be a little bit nervous as he's walking to the mound, the second base umpire, and he had their arm around each other as they were welcoming each other back to play a baseball. But just that smile that he brings to the clubhouse and all the things that Cookie is about. You know, he and Andre Thornton are the only two gentlemen in our franchise to be awarded the Community Service Award. So, and you know Andre very well. So, two special human beings. It's great to have him back. It's going to be interesting, 37 years old, to see what role he might fit for this organization. But for now, it's just so awesome to see him in our uniform and walking through that clubhouse talking to these young pitchers.
Yeah, that's another thing that rubbing off his influence, rubbing off on these kids. And the organization throughout the years has had pretty decent luck with these minor league signings. I remember we brought in Scott Kazmir, and there's been a few others. Who was that Japanese pitcher that we brought in a few years ago, Bob? You would know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. I can't.
But we've had success with some of these minor league contracts.
Yeah, we have. You know, the way we have to do it, that's where our due diligence is. There's 16 major league teams that are in the middle markets that we can't go out and buy the $30 million, $70 million player. It's not just us. There's 15 of us. So I challenge anybody out there to tell me what middle market baseball team has signed a player to a $30 million, even $27 million contract. It just doesn't happen. You know, you mentioned an interesting point about opening day roster. You know, the 5 guys who will start on opening day probably aren't your 5 in August. Back in 2022, we were pretty fortunate that Cal Quantrill and Tristan and Shane Bieber each tossed 30 or more games. They were 90 plus starts over 700 innings. Last year, it was almost 240 innings combined because of injury. Not only you have to not just rely on the idea that who makes the opening day roster. Back in 2016, 2/3 of our outfield of a team that went to extra innings of Game 7 of the World Series, 2/3 of our opening day outfield, Colin Cowgill and Marlon Byrd. So just as that to me really, you know, emphasizes your point that what this roster looks like August 1st to carry you through the last 2 months of a pennant race to win your division, the way our business is set up, win your division and get to October baseball. Who's on that roster August 1st really matters.
Well, I want to get back to the mid-level markets you talked about and the financials of baseball and fans for the life of them. God bless them, but they just don't understand the difference between Major League Baseball and the NHL, the NBA, and the NFL, and particularly the NFL. The Green Bay Packers get as much money from the league as do the New York Giants. I mean, right. That isn't the way it works in baseball. But I want to mention the San Diego market because they are considered a mid-level market, and they have spent enormous money on some of these players like Machado and Tatis, et cetera. They just traded Soto away because I just can't afford it. It hasn't gotten them to the World Series. And the other factor is in San Diego, because I'll be asked by fans, well, San Diego's done it, but they're also the only game in town. There's no other NHL, NBA, NFL franchise there anymore.
Exactly. I mean, when people discuss payrolls, and our payroll can fluctuate from 70 million to 155 million, which it was in 2016, 2017, and 140 million in 2018, as we were in a period of time where our players were a little older, they're making more money, and we're in a position to add to the franchise, to the roster, simply because we were on the cusp of being one of the better teams in in all of baseball, which we were at that time. The San Diego Padres, being the only show in town, just dominate their ticket sales, their corporate marketing dollars. If people are scratching their head trying to figure out, well, what does that really mean? Bring it home. Maybe it will soak in a little bit more when the Browns left Cleveland. The NFL told the Browns they could move out of Cleveland, Ohio, and there were only 2 franchises in Cleveland. What happened with us as a team moving into a brand new building with a championship caliber team? We sold out for 5 straight years, which had never happened once in the history of baseball. The history of baseball. Nobody had ever sold out an entire season. We do it 5 years in a row because we were a 2 pro sports town, with one team really getting after it, which happened to be us at that time. So people need to understand Milwaukee's in a little bit of a different situation with a retractable dome. They never rain out. People know they can travel from that whole area of Wisconsin to go to a weekend game in April, and they know they're going to play. And so their attendance is always 2.5 to 2.8 million, which gives them added revenue. So there's a couple who have a unique situation. But overall, the Cincinnati's, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Kansas City, Baltimore, all of us, we live in the same world. Now, having said that, I would just remind folks that the last 11 years combined records in Major League Baseball, the Dodgers are the only team the last 11 years to win 1,000 total games. The Yankees are second at 940. Houston Astros are third at 922. We're fourth most wins in 11 years with 921. The Yankees have won 19 more games than us the last 11 years, and they've spent $1 billion more on players than us. 19 more wins.
That's fascinating. Here's another point that fans don't realize. The radio contract. I'm strictly talking about the radio contract that the Yankees have in New York gives them more money than the combined television contract of the Cleveland Indians, now Guardians, and the Cincinnati Reds. Television revenue from what is now known as the Bally Sports Net. Combined.
Right. Absolutely. You know, you sit there and you read about the Dodgers are getting $300 million a year for their local media rights. We get 60-ish. The Reds maybe 55. Kansas City maybe 50, 55. Pittsburgh, same one in there. Again, we're around. So just that alone, as you said, there's an unfair playing field when you get the concept of payroll and revenue.
And
But
that's not going to change.
It's not going to change. It's not
going to change. But and tell the fans why it won't change.
Well, the strength of the union. I mean, it's simple as that. So what has baseball done? The question is, what has baseball done for competitive balance? There was a time not long ago where the rosters of a Major League Baseball team could be unlimited. Therefore, the Yankees could have 10 farm teams and have 250 players in their system. One of the elements of competitive balance in our business, every team can now only have 4 minor league teams and only 165 players in their organization. That's part of the competitive balance. So we need to be out smarting, out scouting, putting our money in the resources to make these young men better athletes. The international money now is the same. Whether you want to spend your whole pot of money for the international signings on one player or split it amongst 3, 4, 5 players, 6 players, that's up to your organization and how you want to operate. But the competitive balance aspect of having only 4 farm teams, right now, Bruce, there's 185 athletes in our complex. We have to be down to 165 by April 1st, I believe it is, or March 31st, as every team does. So we're going to have to say goodbye to 20 young men, unfortunately, by the time spring training ends. There's a number of other things that have happened in the game of baseball for a competitive balance. All that means is we just have to do our job better. And I just explained to people over the last 11 years, we've competed against Houston, New York, maybe not the Dodgers because of 1,000 wins, but we're right there. St. Louis is right behind us. They're another incredible middle market team that knows how to get it done.
But they're the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
Because that's the best baseball market in the country. They can be in last place and they're still going to draw close to 3 billion.
Correct.
Let me get into the breakdown of the competition and the spring training. I don't even want to spend much time on the pitching because it looks so set. We touched upon it a little bit with Carrasco, but with Bieber, McKenzie, Bybee, Williams, Allen, those last 3, I'm so excited about these 3 kids. I've talked to you off the air about Allen. I think he reminds me about like a young Jim Cott. Younger viewers who have no idea who Jim Cott is turned out to be one of the greatest crafty lefties, finesse lefties of all time, a Jamie Moyer type in more of the modern era. But I love all of them. Before I comment on the pen, how is McKenzie's health?
Well, he pitched today. He's pitching today, so I don't. He's throwing and he's strong. He's feeling good. Physically, mentally, he's feeling good. Again, they monitored his workload as they did Gavin Williams and Tanner's and Logan's and Shane Bieber's, and they're just starting to get on the mound in Cactus League action, which you get a little more adrenaline flowing, obviously, in a Cactus League game than you do in a simulated game down on the back fields. But he's feeling good, again, both mentally and physically, and we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed that, he reverts back to the guy that we saw in 2022 to be a part of this rotation.
The bullpen looks very strong, obviously with Clase at the back end. You have Stefan Barlow brought in during the offseason, Karinchak, Henches, Sandlin, Curry, I mean, it's all there. It's very competitive. Has Vogt said if the club is going to carry 13?
Probably. I think that's the focus at this point. Cade Smith is a young man, 24-year-old Canadian. He's 6'5", 230, throws in the high 90s, hits 100, is somebody to keep an eye on now that Trevor Stephan and Karinchak have been a little bit banged up here in the early part of spring training and not sure when they're going to be available to us at the opening of the season. He's really shown and opened up some eyes to the coaching staff on how big and strong and a young man. He's a draft pick of ours, and so he's been through the minor or our player development system. So he's somebody to keep an eye on. Joey Cantillo, and again, lefty, Carlos Carrasco possibly making that 13, member staff of ours. Pitching's going to be fine.
Espino won't be ready until like the All-Star break, if at that.
Yeah, again, they're going to go as slow as they possibly can. A high school kid who's had a lot of obstacles, unfortunately, but he came into camp. He's feeling good. He feels healthy. but they're just putting the reins saying, hey,
Right.
we got to be
He may
careful.
be the most talented. He may be the most talented of the whole bunch of these young.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, catching position, I thought it was a nice move bringing Hedges back. He has all that vast experience defensively, great clubhouse presence, and Bo Naylor will benefit from his presence, Bob.
Yeah, Bo, if you would ask me today who's going to have the breakout season of our ball club, I think it's Bo Naylor's ready to take the mantle and as a #1 draft pick. You know, it's funny. Josh was talking to Tom Hamilton at the batting cage, and he asked him about the Drew brothers were 3 brothers who were drafted #1 in baseball until the Naylor family had 3 brothers drafted in the first round. And Naylor was quick to point out to Hammy, but the Naylor family, all 3 #1 draft picks were out of high school. One of the Drew brothers was out of college. So, they know, all 3 of them worked hard in the off season together. Bo's gotten a little bigger, stronger as he matures as a young man. I just think he's going to have a terrific season for us. I think he can hit 20+ homers for us from behind the plate and lead the charge. We asked a lot of that young man last year, and
Yeah.
the second part of his first taste of baseball, he had an OPS of over 1,000, so he was up there among the elite for a good month of the season last year. I think he's going to take off.
At first base, obviously, Josh Naylor is the staple, but you've got Manzardo. But the club is going to make a decision on Manzardo and De Los Santos because they're both young power hitters. And in the case of De Los Santos, he's got to make the team. So does that mean that it might look like Manzardo will start at AAA, Bob?
Yeah, I don't know. DiBiasio De Los Santos is a big man at 20 years old, puts a charge into a baseball. He's hit some balls during BP that not very many have hit in our ballparks here at Goodyear at the complex to go along with Janeski Noel and Jonathan Rodriguez, just 3 big, they're all, in the 6'3", 250 kind of range that can put a charge into a baseball. Kyle Manzardo is a hitter. He is a professional hitter, just like Chase DeLauder. Kyle's 23, DeLauder's 22. 2 kids that I'm in love with. Juan Brito at 22. Man, he's a ball player. Angel Martinez, same thing, 22 years old. They've got some ability, and they're moving in on, a pretty darn good middle infield. Arias Rocchio battling at shortstop, obviously Hosey at third, and the Platinum Glove winner at second, the best defensive player in all of the American League at second base. Our infield's going to be okay.
Yeah, Jimenez converted shortstop. He's a natural shortstop, and what he's accomplished defensively at second base. So what's going to happen at short between Arias and Rocchio?
Well, that's going to be interesting. You know what's interesting about it is that they're 180-degree different. Rocchio's a littler guy, a little skinnier. Not that he's skinny compared to Arias. Arias is a big, strong, powerful arm guy. Rocchio is more Omar Vizquel-like, the great hands, the great footwork, strong enough arm, where Arias is, a guy that has a cannon. He can throw a ball over from shortstop almost at 100 miles an hour, can turn the double play. I mean, he's just a powerful guy. So it's going to be, I don't know who has.
Come down to who's the better hitter?
Well, I think Rocchio puts the bat on the ball more consistently, but again, Arias can put the ball out of the ballpark a little bit more regularly because he's got power. But it's going to be, that's
Yeah.
still the one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, nice problem to have. But what might be a problem with the team as I look at it is the outfield.
Yeah.
And we've got to get more power and production out of that outfield.
Well, we
Straw
do.
is without question one of the best defensive center fielders in the major leagues. It's a tragedy, as I've told you off the air, that he didn't finish in the top 3 for consideration for the Gold Glove. That's a joke.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is you gotta hit. And he doesn't hit sufficiently because we don't have that power with the other positions. I love Kwan as a leadoff man, but he's not a power hitter. Brennan is a key. What are we going to do in that outfield? I know the club is high on this Florial. Is he ready?
Well, Florial's another big kid. Came over, obviously, as you know, the Yankees hit 28 homers at AAA for the Yankees last year. And one of the nicest young men you'll ever want to meet. I'm telling you, just such a really cool young man. He does have a chance to make his mark in the outfield. Obviously, Stephen Kwan, our guys believe Stephen is one of the top left fielders in the game of baseball with what he does as a Gold Glove outfielder and setting the table and getting on base and the way he can run and just the way he is in that locker room and in the dugout. They love his approach. But they had a conversation with Miles Straw at the end of last year, all throughout the winter. I mean, he went to Columbus 3 different times, flew into Cleveland, worked out here, and then drove down to Columbus, worked out there to try to get more authority into his swing. Remember when we first got him, he was a consistent offensive player. And all of a sudden it turned into where he just struggled terribly and just trying to regain the form and get a mindset where he can go attack the baseball because of his ability to change a game when he has a glove on his hands. Ramon Laureano, and Will Brennan. That's going to be, what kind of consistent offense can we throw at people when we know we're going to pitch it well, we know we're going to catch it well. It's the little things that Stephen Vogt has been preaching, taking the extra base, a ball bounces into home plate, being ready to steal, being aggressive. We're going to be that kind of offensive team until we change the nature of who we are and have a few more guys in the lineup who can put the ball out of the ballpark. But I think we will have that in our catcher and our third baseman and our first baseman, and whoever DH is going to have the ability to hit and put the ball out of the ballpark. So we need to get that one area of our organization turned around.
The beauty is the division. It
Yep.
is still, you can make an argument about the National League Central, but most consider the American League Central the weakest division in baseball, which works in our favor. The Twins won their first round last year. You get into the playoffs, anything can happen. The Diamondbacks proved that last year again.
Yeah.
So the beauty is we're in this division. It's very winnable. And I'd like to conclude. I mean, the Twins appear to still be the biggest challenge, but they lost Sonny Gray. They lost Kenta Maeda. You don't know about Buxton. You don't know about Lewis. He gets hurt a lot too, the young phenom. So even with them being considered the odds-on favorite, and I like our pitching more than Minnesota, but they do seem to be the consensus pick to repeat in our division.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I'm not 100% sure why. Totally. I know it's probably because our division is what it is in 2024 that you give the nod to the team that won it the previous year. Their offense has a little more pop than ours, no question. But I think our starting rotation and our bullpen is better, and I think we catch the ball better. Detroit's moving up the ladder. It's going to be interesting to see after so many years struggling if they can figure out how to win. That's not an easy thing to do. The Kansas City Royals.
They've got a good
they-
manager there now, though.
Yeah, they do. Detroit has a good manager there. Kansas City made some very interesting moves this offseason as they're trying to get a new ballpark in downtown Kansas City. So they made some moves, but they have.
I don't see their pitching.
No.
I can't see their pitching, Bob.
Right. And the White Sox
Oh.
always seem to
Oh,
be a little bit off.
I'll tell you what, from all my connections in Chicago, where I'm originally from, as you know, I mean, everybody's excited about the Cubs, and they're just discounting the White Sox. Now, that may be a dangerous thing to do because you never know in baseball.
Right.
It's so unpredictable. But let's face it, they've been underachieving these last few years. And I'm surprised that Cease is still a member of their roster, but who knows which direction they're going to go.
Exactly. I think most people in baseball thought Dylan Cease would be gone by now.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing for Chicago. He's a one of the top young pitchers in baseball. So for them to have him, but their entire rotation, they have a very athletic offensive team. But somewhere along the line, they just seem not to be able to figure it out. Again, our division's there for the taking. As we look through our philosophy is we've acquired, drafted, traded for, signed a whole ton of talented young players. We need to find out which one of these young players are major league impact players. And the only way to do that is playing. And this is going to be an interesting season for us in that regard. There's going to be some young men that really make their mark with this organization. And there's others, just the sheer numbers, that just may not be able to stick on a big league roster. But that's always the fun of a 6-month baseball season. But all I know is we're going to be in the thick of it all year long. And again, baseball is built by win your division.
Yep.
And get to October and hope your pitching is healthy.
Well, the home opener is already sold out. That's on April the 8th. But the only question that I have in conclusion with you is anybody going to be able to see it? Because the full eclipse is going to occur on that afternoon. And from what I understand from my research, it is the first total eclipse in Cleveland since 1806. Now, I know that the new lighting system put in was pretty good, but you've never faced a dilemma like this before.
A few years ago, when we began learning about the eclipse, we petitioned Major League Baseball and said, wouldn't it be really cool if we had opening day on the same day? And then once we got into it with our discussions with NASA, our discussions with the city of Cleveland, we're like, oh boy, this is going to be really something. A 5:10 start, we should be ready to go. Guys will be able to see that 5-ounce little white pill that our game is based on and have some fun. We're going to open the gates at 2:00. The totality of the path of totality, it will be about 3:13 for 3, 4, 5 minutes. So all I will tell you is don't miss it, because the next one's not coming over Cleveland till 24:44 is what they say. So I don't think any of us will be around.
Bob DiBiasio, Vice President of the Cleveland Guardians. Thank you, old friend. Let's tee it up soon.
You got it, sir. Love to do that. Thanks for having me as always, Bruce. Be good.
All right, buddy. We will have more on Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network when we return. I'll take a look at the National League Central, and it's the Ask Bruce segment.
Now here is the risk that Brown had to take with
Bruce Drennan back with you. Bonus time with Drennan, Big Play Sports Network. This segment here, as we get you ready for the baseball season, we take division by division every single week. This week, we're going to look at the National League Central. And I'll start with the Pittsburgh Pirates, who finished 76 and 86 a year ago. And quite frankly, I think that was pretty good considering their franchise. Derek Shelton is their manager. Their payroll is only $69 million, and their attendance was only 1.6 million. I wonder how they were able to draw that. You know why they were able to draw that? Because they've got a beautiful, relatively new ballpark still. And it's a great place to take the family and enjoy watching big league ball. But the fans have got to be frustrated because they don't have any money to spend and they don't do it wisely in developing their own players. They trade them away. Hayes is a nice looking third baseman, 271, 15 homers, 61 RBIs. Reynolds gives him a little pop with 24 homers and 84 RBIs, but their pitching is very weak. Martin Perez, come on. Mitch Keller, Gonzalez, Bednar is going to be their closer. Not bad, 39 saves, but I see nothing but a last place finish for Pittsburgh this year. The Milwaukee Brewers are a myth to me. Obviously, Craig Counsell was their manager. Now he's gone. Pat Murphy has taken over. Excuse me. But I don't understand for the life of me why they traded Hader a couple of years ago to say, I just don't get that. They did finish 92 and 70. Their payroll is 125 million and their attendance 2.5 million. You just heard Bobby D talking on how they can do that because of their dome. Jake Bowers is new to their ball club. The former Indian will be manning first base. Willie Adames, 24 homers and 80 RBIs at short. Wilson Contreras behind the plate, good ball player, 289 average, 17 homers and 89 RBIs. Also, Christian Yelich, 278, 76 RBIs, still has pop in that bat. And Jackson Chiriaro, rookie, is someone to watch. He'll be in their outfield. Freddie Peralta, Wade Miley, two of their pitchers. Devin Williams, 36 saves a year ago. But Corbin Burns traded away this year. Why? I don't get it. Hader of the year before, as I mentioned. 4 straight postseason appearances for the Milwaukee Brewers. Maybe they'll do it again. It's a debate whether their division is the weakest in baseball or ours. I think ours is a little weaker, but certainly it's a winnable division, that's for sure. The St. Louis Cardinals had high expectations this year because of going out and adding Sonny Gray, Lance Lynn, and Kyle Gibson to their rotation to join Miles Mikolas and also Steven Matz, the former Met. But then Gray gets hurt in the spring training game the other day, and he's questionable for opening day. But all 3 of them are new to the ball club, and the Cardinals are hoping under manager Oliver Marmol that they will improve upon a very disappointing season for them. Rarely see it. 71-91, the record a year ago. Their payroll still up there at 153 million. Best franchise, best fan base in all of baseball. 3.2 million with a 71-91 team. Isn't that amazing? First 90-loss season for the Cardinals since 1990. And the Cardinals haven't had back-to-back losing seasons since 94 and 95. The Chicago Cubs are going to be an interesting team this year. Craig Counsell goes from Milwaukee to Chicago to man the fort on the north side. They were 83 and 79 last year with a payroll of 189 million this year. Attendance last year, 2.7. They definitely could have qualified for the playoffs if not for some key losses down the stretch. But they've got a lack of power, although they added Bellinger just the other day, big power hitting free agent who was with them a year ago and hit 307 with 26 homers and 97 RBI. So that's going to mean a lot. I think Suzuki's got to step up more. The Japanese outfielder, 285 a year ago, 20 homers, 74 RBIs. Then you got Nick Horner and Dansby Swanson, arguably one of the best double play combinations in all of baseball, just tremendous defensively. Horner hit 283. Swanson had 22 homers and 80 RBIs at the shortstop position. Ian Happ is still in the outfield. He had 21 homers and 84 RBIs. And then you have Chris Morrell, 26 homers and 70 RBIs. Justin Steele, Jamison Tyon, and Kyle Hendricks will man that starting rotation. El Zole will be the closer. But the key will be their pitching, as it always is on the north side. But the Cubs could very well threaten to win it this year. It's going to be an interesting season for them. And that brings me to the Cincinnati Reds. Of course, our partners in spring training, sharing the Goodyear complex downstate, of course, we'll play them in interleague play a couple of different times. David Bell comes back as their manager, payroll of $96 million, attendance over 2 million, because it's a great baseball market. Candelario is new to the ball club. They added him in the offseason, 22 homers and 70 RBIs with both the Cubs and Washington a year ago. They've got some really good young ball players. Matt McClain hit 290. Ellie Dela Cruz, 35 stolen bases. Spencer Steer, 23 homers, 76 RBIs. Friedel in the outfield, 279, 18 homers, 66 RBIs. Christian Encarnacion Strand, another young, very promising player. Joey Votto era, that's over. But their pitching will be the key, as it is with just about any club. Hunter Green, Graham Ashcraft, and Andrew Abbott are the keys to that starting rotation. Diaz had 37 saves a year ago, and he figures to be the closer again. They had a team ERA of 5.43. That was 14th in the National League out of 15 teams. So again, pitching, name of the game. I think the division is wide open. It's obviously going to be, in my opinion, a 4-team race. I can't see the Pirates doing it. I don't know. I don't know who to pick. It's up for grabs. So I think it'll be interesting to watch all season long.
Yeah, I mean, as a guy who lived in Cincinnati for 4 years, as I went to school there, I know that the Reds fans are starving for some good baseball. They've obviously not had the best product on the field the last couple years. You mentioned the Joey Votto era is done. I can't tell you how many Joey Votto jerseys I saw there. Obviously, one of their most beloved players in that franchise's history. But you mentioned very bright future for them. Ellie De La Cruz was a phenomenal player who hopefully is going to have a very long career. Jonathan India, we know we have some ties over there with players that we gave them that people think maybe we should have retained, but that's okay.
Will Benson's another one.
Yep, exactly who I was alluding to. But yeah, I would personally say the Reds, but who knows? You just mentioned baseball is the most unpredictable sport there is.
Well, it's the Ask Bruce segment. I think you got a couple of questions, huh?
I do. First one comes from our guy, Andy. He said, do you believe the Guardians offense can use their small ball tactics to their advantage with the rules that were implemented in Major League Baseball last year?
Well, the one rule that comes into play, not necessarily the bigger bases, but the one rule that comes into play is limited pickoff attempts at first base if you've got a runner there. So obviously, because we have to take advantage of every opportunity to manufacture runs, yes, unless you pick that guy off in your second attempt, that's that new rule implementation. So I do think that the Guardians will try to run a lot, take the extra base, and even at third base, Harbaugh's no longer going to be the third base coach, and he was a good one. But yeah, I think that they're going to try to press the defense to make a play because they have to manufacture runs. Unless these kids flourish, blossom, and show more power. But until that happens, as Bobby D was saying, that's the way the Guardians are going to have to score.
Alrighty, next one up, sticking with baseball here. What do you think is the biggest learning curve for a rookie manager in Major League Baseball? Obviously, we know he's alluding to our rookie skipper and Stephen Vogt.
Yeah, the bullpen, the bullpen for sure, and that is the most difficult thing, and that's why in my interview with Bob, I emphasized how much retaining Carl Willis was so important. He'll be right at the side of young rookie manager Stephen Vogt, and that is a tremendous, tremendous asset, especially in Vogt's rookie year. Even though he has vast experience behind the plate, it's knowing how that bullpen, who worked the day before, how many pitches did he throw, what is his endurance factor, what's his track record. I'm looking ahead to the end of the week rather than this series, who I'm going to need, who's going to be the starting pitcher, and I might need that setup guy or that one inning guy. That's going to be the most difficult challenge.
Alrighty, last one here, and again, another baseball one. In your opinion, what do you think the most beautiful ballpark is in the Major League Baseball, and is there one that you think is the most underrated?
Well, I'll tell you what, I haven't been to all of them. At one time, I had been to all of them, but there's been so many new ones built since I have been to all of them. I'll put our ballpark with the renovations that the Indians, now Guardians, have made up against just about any of them. It's a beautiful facility. It's been modernized several times. It's a very family-friendly ballpark. I absolutely love what they've done, and they continue to make it family-friendly and fan-friendly as far as the vantage points. That's a key, in my opinion, to enjoying a game, and they've done a great job with it. I mentioned earlier, the Pittsburgh ballpark is a tremendously attractive facility. The Cincinnati ballpark, I'm sure you've been there, Ryan. That's a beauty too. What is that called? The Great American
Yep,
Ballpark?
Great American.
Yankee Stadium is Yankee Stadium. You've got the history there. Same thing with Wrigley Field and Fenway Park in Boston. Camden Yards has withstood the test of time. That's a great facility too for the Baltimore Orioles. I've heard that and on television I've seen it many times. The San Francisco ballpark looks intriguing. Bonds made that right field over the wall Bay Area with the kayakers famous. And that looks to be a beauty. Dodger Stadium is now antiquated. It needs renovations like crazy, and they can only do so much. So, but there's been so many new ones put up.
Yeah, well, that's it for the Ask Bruce segment here, Bruce.
Well, that about wraps things up for this version of Bonus Time with Drennan. Don't forget, next week on the show, Al Pulowski will be joining us. He is the host of Guardians Live pregame and postgame over on the Bally Sports Network with the upcoming season coming on. More so than concentrating on our ball club. And I will ask him about the Guardians, obviously, maybe not as in detail as I did with Bobby D today, but I want to look at the overall Major League Baseball picture and pick Al's brain about that. So we can look forward to it. We'll have plenty more on the Cavs, college basketball, and we're getting close to the Masters. It's really right around the corner. We'll start getting you ready for that as well. I'm Bruce Drennan on behalf of Ryan Smith. Thanks for joining us on Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. We'll see you next week. Until then, as always, remember, I love you, Ohio.